Okay, so we're here with Zuhdi Jasser, and he's agreed to discuss his views with us on various issues. We thought we'd take advantage of his perspective and ask him the basic question in foreign policy, which is, do you have a principle that permits you to determine when we should go to war and when we should not?
I served in the Navy for 11 years, and as an American citizen and as a patriotic American, I go to war when my government and when my country decides we should go to war. Ultimately that's what our citizenship oath is about. And I think if you look at Muslims that are radicalized, this is actually, that question touches at the core of where the radicalization problem happens, is that they're told that allegiance and identification with what I call Islamo-patriotism pulls them into allegiance to when the Islamic State or any Islamic State decides they should go to war.
Well, let's get into that in a second, but when you were in the armed forces, you had to do what your commander said. I understand that. But I'm asking you a different question. I mean, now that you're a private citizen, you have opinions about whether this war is proper or this war is not proper. Do you have a principle that permits you to determine, I think, let's say, the Iraq war was improper or proper or whatever? You follow what I'm asking?
Sort of. I mean, all faiths have doctrines of just war and what is or what is not just war. I'm a co-founder of a movement called the Muslim Reform Movement that we just launched 2 months ago. And one of the primary, we have 9 simple tenets that we've espoused. One of them is that we reject armed and violent jihad. So I do think one of the modern reform things that has to happen in Islam is the rejection of jihad. So my concept of just war does not involve jihad, which is the Islamic concept of just war.
Okay,
has
so we
to
know
do
what
with jihad.
you're against. You're
Yeah.
against religious wars.
Yeah.
And I assume almost all of America is also against that.
Exactly.
You
So
know, leaving aside the Crusades, that was a long time ago.
Right. So as an American, my concept of a just war is that war that we have to engage for our own national security, and that also is necessary to protect an evil from rising. We see, for example, I believe it would be just war. There's no more just war than defeating both ISIS and Assad. I believe we should have done something in Damascus and in Aleppo back in 2011, which I was testifying to Congress, that we should have had a no-fly zone. We should have been doing a lot before even jihadists were flowing into Syria. And I told them that would be happening if we didn't get involved, even from the air, not boots on the ground, but from the air. We should have not only said verbally that Assad must go, but militarily made it a fait accompli. And then since then he's done crimes against humanity, used chemical weapons. I mean, there is no more just war than putting an end to the Assad regime.
So you think that each country should decide whether the other country is a just regime or not, and if they think that the other country's leader, like Assad, is not just, then they should invade them and attack them and defeat them and destroy them?
No, I'm not sure what you're asking me.
Well, what I'm asking you is, should every country follow this principle, which is that you've announced, which is... Well, let me ask you the question. Should every country follow this principle, which is, we will make a determination about the other countries. If we think that the other country is run improperly, it's tyrannical, it's not treating its citizens well, it's violating their rights, then we will go and attack them and get rid of this evil.
No, you're the entire way you formulated your question doesn't make any sense to me. There's no doubt there are human rights violations in many countries. 70% of the world lives in oppressive regimes. Right. I'm not saying that we should invade any of those countries, but when you have a violation of war crimes happening in which chemical weapons are being used and a genocide being perpetrated, then I do believe that crosses the threshold of just simply talking about something not just happening or prisoners of conscience. I'm not saying every time there's prisoners of conscience or you have regimes like Saudi Arabia or Egypt or any of the regimes that are totalitarian, it means we should invade them. But if you have a civil war happening in which you have a regime like the Assad regime perpetrating deaths that have risen now into 400,000 dead with 10 million displaced, that rises to the threshold in which, by the way, it's no longer a civil war. You have Russia running carpet bombing operations in Aleppo. You have tens of thousands of Iranian soldiers and Iranian influence. So this is no longer a civil war. And for America to sit that out and not even have done any no-fly zones in order to prevent the outflow of millions of refugees into Europe and allow them to stay into Syria, I think that calculus is very different than the way you presented your question.
So to put it slightly differently, after your clarification, do you think that each country should decide whether the threshold has been overcome, and if they think it has, should attack them? The counter theory to that is respecting national sovereignty and not getting involved in other countries' disputes. That's the other political theory that, in fact, we had before. But now we've adopted a different perspective, which is we will make determinations about other countries, and if we think they've surpassed the threshold of abuse of their citizens, we will invade them, attack them, and destroy them because they're evil. My question is, are you comfortable with every country making this kind of decision, like Russia, China, etc.?
Listen, again, it sounds like from the way you formulated your question, you've made up your mind on what you're trying to get me to say. I don't. I think it's very different. Certainly, I believe in endorsed national sovereignty. That is not separated or divorced from alliances that we have with NATO. I think the UN is a complete failure and is rendered impotent because of the domination of dictatorships like Saudi Arabia and Russia.
There was no alliance regarding Syria, right? I mean, you're in favor of attacking Syria. We didn't have an alliance with any country that required us to attack Syria, right?
But the